Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Tuesday. And I want to talk a little bit about the big picture of the 2023 draft class. I want to talk about a particular way to frame this draft class that I think is very important when you're trying to evaluate the decisions the team made. And mostly, I think people are pretty over this. I think mostly people kind of get it now. I'm not seeing a whole lot of consternation at this point about the draft selections we made. There are always going to be a few that people don't really like. Like there are still quite a few people I think who really didn't like Charbonnet. I think there are a decent number of people who didn't really like Derek Hall, but there's always going to be some percentage of the fan base that isn't on board with a particular decision. But I want to talk about the big picture here and try to explain why things went down the way they did. And I have kind of a little bit of a theory here, and I used statistics to try to figure out if that theory was sound, and I found that it is. And I believe that this team may be applying some of that philosophy when they make these picks. So let's talk about it. First of all, let's big picture this here. Big picture, the first four picks the Seahawks made in the 2023 NFL Draft were, by and large, not completely, but by and large designed to help the passing offense and help the passing defense. Now, Devon Witherspoon and Derek Hall are defenders that play the run very well, in my opinion, and I think they will help the run defense. But you're drafting an outside cornerback to mostly help with coverage, mostly help against the pass, and you're drafting an edge rusher mostly to help rush the passer. Again, the pass. Jackson Smith Najigba, that one's easy. He's a slot wide receiver. He is going to be a huge part of your passing attack, especially on third down. It's going to be very important for him to get open quickly and become a frequent safety blanket kind of target for Geno Smith or whoever your quarterback is. Some people are going to say, well, Charbonnet doesn't really fall under that category, but I believe that he does. Because Charbonnet, two of his best skill sets, he's a really good pass catcher and he's a really good blocker, really good pass protector. So therefore, Charbonnet, while he is a running back, is going to provide a lot of his value on third down passing plays. I believe he will be our third down back. It was only after those four picks were made that we started addressing the areas people felt like we needed to. Which is, of course, and this was kind of the running meme throughout the draft on my streams, people wondering when were we going to address the obvious need, the thing that we obviously needed to fix. And it was something that I believe the team needed to fix as well, and I would have understood if the team decided to spend more of their top 100 picks on fixing it, but it was primarily the run defense. People were wondering, why aren't we addressing this run defense that was so bad last year? Why aren't we getting linemen? Why didn't we get any linebackers? Because we didn't get any linebackers the whole draft. Why aren't we getting guys who can help us stop the run? Why aren't we getting depth on the interior offensive line? Why aren't we trying to improve the interior offensive line? We didn't do that until round 4. And then in round 4, we started taking interior offensive linemen, interior defensive linemen. We used our first 4 picks on day 3 on that, but it wasn't until we got through over 100 players. And people were wondering, why was that such a low priority? And my theory, my best guess, is that despite what the team did last year, where they were good, where they were bad, where they needed improvement, where things were good, where things needed to get better, the team is acknowledging the direction of the current league. And I wanted to see if my hypothesis was true. So I did a handful of statistical analyses of 2022 NFL action. So here is a spreadsheet that I put together, and we're going to look at various correlation coefficients. If you don't know what a correlation coefficient is, you can look it up in more detail if you want to, but here's the idea. A correlation coefficient is a number between -1 and 1. If the number is 1, that means there is a perfect correlation between two data sets. If the number is -1, there is a perfect inverse or negative correlation between two sets of data. And if the number is 0, that means there's no correlation whatsoever. So basically, correlation starts to become more and more evident the closer you get to either 1 or -1. And the closer you get to 0, the less correlation there is. So basically, I wanted to see what were the main influencing factors on a team's success, both in terms of scoring points, preventing points, and ultimately winning games, the most important thing. And the higher the correlation coefficient is, the more of a relation there is between two particular things. So take a look at this. I put every team's offensive rank last year into a column here, 1 to 32. If a team is ranked 1, that means they had the best offense in the league. And if a team is ranked 32nd, they had the worst offense in the league. I did the same for record. If a team is ranked 1 in record, that means they had the best record in the league. 32nd means they had the worst record in the league. And then I drew the correlation coefficient between those two numbers. And here's what I got. 0.776 approximately. So that is a very high correlation between two data sets. What that basically means is that whether or not a team is good on offense in terms of scoring points is highly correlated to whether or not they're going to have a good record. And you can go column by column and you can see that there is often a very close relationship here. The Bills have a perfect correlation. Their offensive rank is 3, was ranked 3rd. Their record was ranked 3rd. Panthers, 19th, record 22nd, almost perfect. Bengals, almost perfect as well. Cowboys, very close. Chiefs, perfect. Jaguars, almost perfect. Colts, almost perfect. The outliers, the instances of a team having a big difference between their offensive scoring output per game and their record, there aren't very many good examples. Like the Steelers had an average record, even though they had a really bad offense. The Buccaneers had a bad offense and an average record. There are some examples, but overall the correlation is very strong. And I did the exact same thing to correlate defense to record, correlating a team's defensive ranking, number of points allowed, versus their record. The correlation, the exact same formula, the exact same equation, produced a drastically lower correlation coefficient. What this means is, for the year of 2022, the relationship between the best offensive teams and the most successful teams was much stronger than the relationship between the best defensive teams and the best teams. And if I were to go back through previous years, 2021, 2020, 2019, that would probably continue to bear out. And this is something that I may look to do in the future. I don't know if it will be this stark, but as you can see, the defensive correlation coefficient is not even 0.45. Not even. There is correlation, of course, but it is much bigger for offense. And what this says, what I am trying to convey with this spreadsheet, is the fact that this is an offensive league, and the teams that are elite offensively have an easier time of being elite. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into this. I wanted to take a look at some more narrow statistics from the NFL. And I started with what I suspected would be the highest correlation between success and overall success. Third down conversion rate. Which teams are best on third down? So again, I put all the rankings into a column. The Bills were the best team on third down, so they're number 1 here. The Chiefs are second best, they're number 2. The Broncos were 32nd, so they're 32. And I correlated that to their overall offensive ranking, points scored. And you can see quite high, very high third down to offensive correlation coefficient. This means that the teams that are really good on third down are also really good on offense, generally speaking. And the teams that are bad on third down are bad on offense, generally speaking. The exceptions would be teams like the Lions. They were average on third down, but elite on offense. The Seahawks were actually an outlier. They were below average on third down, but above average to good on offense. But for the most part, most of these numbers, very close correlation. And I also did the exact same correlation check between third down effectiveness and a team's record. And it was very high, almost 0.7, 0.692. So look at those two numbers, 0.732, 0.692. Very high correlations. Again, the teams that are really good on third down are really good overall. The teams that are bad on third down tend to be bad overall. And the teams that are average on third down tend to be average. So third down correlates heavily to success. Your ability to stay on the field on those typically 10 to 14 plays a game, converting the needed yards, it often defines everything. And to check to be sure that I was right about that, to verify that I wasn't just using confirmation bias, I wanted to look at a few other numbers. Let's go with rushing offense, rushing yards per game. I wanted to take the correlation between a team's rushing yards per game and their offensive rank. And in some cases, yes, it's very even. Look at the Cardinals. They were below average to bad rushing yards per game. They were below average to bad on offense. But the Falcons, elite in rushing yards per game, but mediocre offense. Ravens, elite rushing yards per game, below average offense. Plenty of instances like the Bengals had one of the worst rushing yard per game totals, but they had a really good offense. And the correlation, very low. 0.178. Not even 0.18. Very low correlation between the best offenses and the best rushing offenses. Like you had examples like the Steelers, who had a really high rushing yards per game, but they had a bad offense. You had teams like the Giants, really high rushing yards per game, slightly below average offense. Vikings barely ran the ball at all, but they had a top 8 offense. Chiefs, below average rushing attack, best offense in the league. So the correlation barely exists. And the correlation was even lower for a team's rushing yards per game rank and record. 0.114. Not even 0.12. Barely existent. There's practically no correlation here. The Falcons had one of the best rushing attacks in the league, and they had one of the worst records. Literally, the Bears had the best rushing attack in the league and were 32nd in record. They literally picked number 1 overall. The Bengals had a really good record despite only having 28th most rushing yards in the league. You had teams like like I said, the Chiefs, they had the best record in the league and were 20th. So you're not seeing any kind of correlation between teams running the ball well and having success overall. And just to be sure, I wanted to do the exact same thing for yards per carry. This is more of an indication of efficiency in running the ball. Which teams correlated well between their yards per carry average ranking and their offensive ranking? I found a little more luck here. If you correlate every team's yards per carry rank to their offensive rank overall, it's a little better, but it's still weak. 0.31. 0.311, let's call it. So not even 1/3 of the way to full correlation. You have teams like the Bears that are 1 and then 23rd. 23rd overall on offense. The Bengals pretty much flipped the opposite way. Cowboys ranked below average to bad in yard per carry average, but had an elite offense. Lions were average and had an elite offense. So there is correlation, but it's weak. And the correlation between a team's yards per carry average and their record basically didn't exist. 0.073. That may as well be no correlation at all. So your ability to run the ball for a high clip correlates very, very weakly to your actual overall success in 2022. So we are not seeing these numbers with your running game correlating at all with your actual overall success as a team. So what is most important? Now let's look at a few more things, by the way, because I wanted to look at the run defense in particular. I did want to take a look at the rushing offense to kind of characterize my point about what is important in the modern NFL. I want to look at run defense as well. So, rushing yards allowed per game. This is the column I had here. This is every team's ranking in rushing yards allowed per game. And in some places, you will find a very clean correlation between a team's rushing yards allowed and their defensive overall ranking. Like the Ravens are perfect. The Bills almost perfect. Panthers almost perfect. Bears almost perfect. Bengals perfect. But you're also going to find some pretty extreme examples of the opposite. The Cardinals, not even close. The Cowboys, not particularly close, not particularly a good indicator there. The Chiefs are kind of as well. And overall, there is correlation. It's a decent amount of correlation. 0.560, call it basically. 590. 590. Pretty good. There is good correlation there. However, what about the correlation between a team's rushing yards allowed per game and their record? Weak 0.337. So like a third of the way to full correlation. Yeah, there are some really good examples, of course. The Bills are still a strong example. The Falcons came out really good here, but the Cardinals, they were slightly above average in allowing rushing yards per game, and they were one of the worst teams in the league. You had examples like the Broncos. They were top 10 in rushing yards allowed and were one of the worst teams in the league. You find good examples like the Texans. They were worst, and they were second worst record. Chiefs are okay in terms of a comparison, but then you have teams like the Chargers, who get run all over and still had a top 8 record. They were still one of the better teams in the league. The Rams, above average in allowing rushing yards, but bad, really bad in their actual record. Vikings allowed a ton of rushing yards and had a top 5 record. So, overall, the correlation is weak. The teams that allow the most rushing yards are not the teams that are bad, and the teams that allow the fewest rushing yards are not the teams that are good, typically speaking. Last correlation coefficient I want to look at in this video will be yards allowed per carry ranking. And this is, again, I want to capture efficiency as well as volume. And as you can see, there is a pretty good correlation between the teams that allow the fewest yards per carry and the teams that have the best overall scoring defenses. 0.573, basically. 0.573, and in some cases it's pretty much perfect, but in some cases it's way out of whack. Not even close. Like, look at the Colts. And then, of course, the correlation between record and yards allowed per carry barely exists. 0.120. So you've seen all this data now. You've seen all these numbers. You've seen all these correlations between a team's success and their success in a particular area. And I feel like this paints a very clear picture. These numbers are not particularly close. Like this is very close to having no meaningful correlation at all. So there's a little bit of evidence that indicates that your effectiveness defending the run is going to be influential on your ultimate team record. But it's minimal. It's very close to no correlation at all. Of course, none of these numbers went into the negative. Negative would actually indicate that having a good run defense is detrimental to your success. That's obviously not true, but that's what that would mean. So we're not that far away from that. We're not there. There is some degree of correlation, but it's thin. Run defense overall, I mean, it's stronger, but it's still thin. Your ability to run the ball, it's very thin overall, I think. The one thing that wasn't thin was how good you were on third down. The teams that are good on third down, they're going to win. And what do teams do on third down? They pass the ball. This is for the 2021 season because Sharp Football Stats hasn't updated for 2022 yet. But the point is, I was just trying to get an idea. How often do teams pass the ball on third down? This season, in 2021, 76%. So more than 3/4 of the time. Less than 1/4 of the time are teams running the ball on third down. Third down's a passing down, right? What do you have to worry about on passing downs? You need receivers who can get open. You need quarterbacks who can find those receivers. You need running backs who can catch passes out of the backfield and go make something happen or pick up a blitzer. You need a team that can pick up yards and run positive plays against a defense that knows a pass is coming. Because, look, if I were to expand this out a little bit, let's go to like 3rd and 4 or more. That number, the average percentage where teams throw the ball goes up to 86%. And a decent chunk of the 14% that's left over is probably going to be give up plays where it's like 3rd and 12 or more. So teams throw the ball on 3rd down. And your ability to convert on 3rd down is by far the strongest correlation I could find between success and winning. And what are these top 4 picks going to do for you? They're going to help with your pass defense. They're going to help with your passing offense. They're going to help you on, wait for it, 3rd down. So I believe that is why this team decided to pick this philosophy. They decided to build on areas of strength. Because you may have noticed in this chart that I did, the Seahawks were one of the teams that were an outlier. They had a top 10 offense with a below average 3rd down conversion rate. They had an above average record despite having a below average 3rd down rate. So getting better on 3rd down is crucial if this team wants to take another step up with their offense. By the way, technically the Seahawks offensive ranking last year was 9th. They were tied with Jacksonville for 9th, but I flipped a coin and we lost, so I put us 10th. But the point is, I mean, it wouldn't change anything radically. It would still be a very similar correlation, and it would still basically prove the same point. This team, there are many ways they need to get better. There are many things they need to do better in 2023. Excuse me, 2023. But the best way they can help themselves is become an elite 3rd down team. If we become elite on 3rd down, our offense will probably be top 5 in the league. We're going to be scoring right up there with teams like the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals. We're going to stay on the field more. Our defense gets to stay on the field less. Teams are not going to be able to run the ball on us nearly as much because they're going to be playing from behind. And guys like Devon Witherspoon and Derek Hall are going to have more effect on the game. So I hope I gave you guys something to think about in this video, something to consider. Maybe if you cast things through this lens of finding other ways to stop the run, finding ways to stop the run that are not directly getting players to tackle running backs and fill gaps on the defensive line, but rather change the circumstances of the game so teams can't run or don't want to run nearly as much, you can also find success. And if you take anything away from this video, I hope it's an understanding that this is not the 1980s. Defense is not correlating that strongly to team success anymore. 3rd down conversions in the passing attack has a lot more to do with your success as a team than anything to do with the running game. I might do some more studies like this in the near future. I might post them on my Patreon and for my YouTube members. But this gives you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say this is a passing league and the best teams tend to be the teams that can pass the ball well, keep the chains moving, and take pressure off their defense rather than having an actually great overall defense. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you guys think. More videos coming soon. I'm going to start my deep dive rookie breakdown videos relatively soon, I think. And we'll hopefully continue to learn more things. But this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes people get really confused when I talk about how the running game doesn't matter as much as it used to. And that's what probably drove our picks. What drove us to not really address that kind of stuff until the 4th round on. I think this is it. And I support it 100% personally. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Whether or not it ends up working as well as we hope, it's the right thing to do. All right, go Hawks.